are. Uh-oh. All right. What are we going to get into first? Check out some YouTube videos. We will, I think, take a look at what Chud is doing on Twitch in a little bit. I was already in there a little bit earlier. I have been listening to a little bit of Zizek. He's been having some, or I guess I was just kind of finishing up a conversation he was having on Christian atheism.
He started to shout at him. Scandinavia.
Let's kind of go back. I really like this, so.
What I want to say is that I think that what I call Christian atheism is still the ethical stance which fits today's predicament. Okay. Let me begin with a simple observation. Those who follow obscure spiritual cosmological speculations have for sure heard of one of the most popular topics in this domain. You know all these mythical stories that when three planets, usually Earth, Moon, and the Sun, find themselves along the same axis, then some big cataclysmic event takes place. The whole order of the universe is momentarily thrown out of joint, and the universe has to find a new balance. You remember that it wasn't taken seriously, but the panic of 2012, where adheres to some old Maya predictions, precisely because I think Earth, Moon, and Sun were in the same line, it's not good. And I think that politically something like this holds for this year, 2017, which is a triple anniversary. In 2017, we do not celebrate only the centenary of the October Revolution, 1917, but also the 150th anniversary of the first edition of Marxist Capital, 1867, and maybe the most tragic event, the 50th anniversary of the so-called Shanghai Commune, when in the climactic moment of the Chinese Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution, it's a wonderful moment, maybe the crucial moment of 20th century communism. Residents of Shanghai, workers and students, decided to take literally Mao's call. You know, when Mao said, attack the headquarters, you don't need neither the party nor the army, people should take over. Well, they took this literally and simply overthrew offices.
What should I play?
The local Communist Party ignored the army and took over. And that was the crucial point.
I kind of want to listen to this, so I might just do some Ready or Not. I think that's what I'm going to do.
And it's an extremely tragic event, because this was then, people don't know this, the biggest battle of the Cultural Revolution. Forget about, okay, they were tragic, all those scenes, you know, red guardists pulling their beard, terrorizing professors, intellectuals, all that. No, it was the battle for Shanghai when the army turned on the very revolutionaries. And one don't know how many, the idea is that it goes into tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dead people. But I think this event is fascinating because I don't like this big question, was Mao sincere or not? At a certain level, he was not. It's clearly that he triggered the Cultural Revolution to regain his full power in the state. But it doesn't matter if Mao was manipulating. Things ran out of control. Ordinary workers took it seriously. Let's have directly the rule of the commune. We don't need the party, we don't need the army, and so on. And it went too far. So I think these three events mark the three stages of the communist movement. First, Capital by Marx outlined the theoretical foundations of the communist revolution. Then, the October Revolution was the first successful attempt to overthrow bourgeois state and build a new social economic order. And then the Shanghai Commune stands for the most radical attempt to immediately realize the most daring aspect of the communist vision, the abolishment of state power and the imposition of direct people's power organized as a network of local communes. It didn't work, and of course I will not answer the question today, namely the big question, what went wrong? I think, that's my hypothesis, what went wrong with this cycle? Perhaps the answer is to be sought, and people don't talk about it, but for me at least, as a Christian atheist, it's the key date. Don't you know that today we have 4 planets in a line, another mega anniversary. 2017 is the 500 years
anniversary some stream
of
issues right now.
1517,
might have to restart.
When Martin Luther put on that door the 95 Theses, Protestantism. And I still think that the Protestantism
maybe
is
my
the
upload
greatest
speed is kind of fucked.
event that you can imagine. Why? Let me begin in a very simplified way, but I'm not totally bluffing, because I presented a version of this text in at a theological colloquium in Cambridge, and it went well, what can I say? So I'm not totally bluffing. Let me begin by this triad of Orthodoxy, Catholicism, and Protestantism. The way I see it, maybe I'm wrong, central to the Orthodox tradition is the notion of theosis, of man becoming like God. Or to quote Saint Athanasius of Alexandria, quote, "He, Christ, or God, was incarnate so that we might be made God." End of quote. What should otherwise seem absurd, that fallen, sinful man may become holy as God is holy, has been made possible through Jesus Christ, who is God incarnate. And then St. Maximus the Confessor wrote in the same vein, again a quote, "A sure warrant for looking with hope to deification of human nature is provided by the incarnation of God, which makes man God to the same degree as God himself.
Hopefully that optimizes the bit rate, but
let us become the image of the one whole God, bearing nothing earthly in ourselves, so that we may consort with God and become gods, receiving from God our existence as gods." End of quote. This orthodox formula, God became man so that man
we got any new weapon
becomes God, is, I think, what Protestantism radically rejects. The deepest insight of Protestantism is that, to put it very simply, God became man and that's it. Nothing more. Everything already happens in the incarnation. What needs to be added is just a shift of perspective. I think that in authentic Christian vision, there is no resurrection to follow. Holy Ghost already is resurrection. Resurrection happens in the Christian community. God dies and he remains dead. We are condemned to freedom. Holy community is not, there is, I read here Christianity in a radically atheist way. Holy Ghost is not some kind of a synthesis, God, man, and then they are brought together. No. With crucifixion,
I love his analysis.
That type of God, you know, this primitive idea.
I love Slavoj's analysis over Christianity.
Great old guy with a long beard who takes care of us, so don't worry.
It's very humanist and also existentialist, kind of like acknowledging
he says, what dies on the cross is
the mental existentialism of humans in general. Like that's an unavoidable drive for us, and it should be addressed.
And that would be the properly Christian trick.
Very humanist, I think. Very humanist.
Gave us all freedom and so on. He said, but he didn't. God abandoned. He just created.
Acknowledging the valid criticisms of life that Christians have, and
you should just shift the perspective. To put it in another
can't
way,
meet that
and
anymore.
I'm here, I'm basing my reading on some very good theologies from my beloved Chesterton onwards. In other religions, to simplify it very much, you have God, man. We have fallen from God, so the idea is let's climb back through some stupid spiritual exercises, whatever you want. Like, let's get rid of our sinful nature, let's go back to God. The Christian solution is a totally different one. It is this one. Okay, let's say you, an ordinary believer, find yourself totally abandoned by God. So what's the way out of it? Not, okay, let me do some good works or...
It's, hey, no shit, everybody is...
Clean. No, it's that at that point, when I'm totally abandoned by God, I identify with Christ, who finds himself in exactly the same position with the famous Father, Father, have you forsaken me? So that it's a wonderful insight that you should see in a very Hegelian way how our separation, we overcome our separation from God, not by rejoining God, but by realizing that this separation is separation also of God from himself.
And he used this in the Peterson debate as well, which is very, I think that hit with Christians very hard.
The moment of divinity is that moment
because it's like, yeah.
Chesterton put it, the moment when God...
Humanists can agree with this sentiment.
You know, because remember, on the cross, when Christ says, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, Father, he for a brief moment becomes a non-believer. Which is a crazy moment. You find this in no other religion. In other religions, you do find men who abandon God. Where do you find God who abandons himself? And again, the Christian solution is not, you suffer, you are low, but don't worry, there are good news. No, there are no good news. Good news are only a different shift of
That's for the
perspective
tourists.
on the bad news. We remain abandoned by God. God will not come to save us. As even conservative theologians who are not stupid knew, like Paul Claudel, my favorite French conservative Catholic, he says very nicely that the ultimate secret of Christianity is not trust God. Things may look bad, but God will help you. No, it's the opposite. God needs our help. Only we can save God. In other words, the divine and some theosophic speculation, I will not go into it, we don't have time to lose here, developed this in a wonderful way where they claim that the secret of incarnation is not that God did something heroic to redeem us. God without incarnation is not fully God. God incarnates himself in man to become fully God. That's the solution of one of my favorites, apart from Hegel, German idealist Schelling, who developed in his Heidegger claim, that these two texts, especially Freiheitsschrift, Schelling's text on the essence of human freedom, and later Weltalter, fragments on the ages of the world, he developed this how God produced Logos, gave birth to Logos, Son. Schelling literally said, to save himself from his own madness. It was, if I may be cynical, a kind of psychiatrists say if you are caught in psychosis, you need creative therapy, through work. Well, that's what God did. And some very, if you think I'm bluffing, some very intelligent Protestant theologists came to the same conclusion. A Norwegian friend of mine gave me a reference and he translated some parts to me because it's not a well-known book, famous only in Norway. The guy's name is Peter Wessel Zapfe, a book on Protestantism God. It's a reading of Book of Job. And you know what's his reading?
Relax.
What does Job discover when he encounters God? When he realizes that God is doing very strange things, punishing him for nothing, and
That
so
he
on.
thinks.
Here is a quote from Zapfe. Job finds himself confronted with a world ruler, God, of grotesque primitiveness.
Which is
a
very
cave dweller,
rare.
a braggart and blusterer, almost agreeable in his total ignorance of spiritual culture.
Oh, fuck.
What is new
I'm
for
restarting.
Job
I want to go
is
for a
not
good
God's greatness in quantifiable terms.
ranking.
That we knew fully in advance. What is new is God's qualitative baseness. And I think this is masked inside also of the big Protestant topic of predestination. You mean God was simply playing a brutal game with us. He didn't care. God decided in advance, you are redeemed, you are lost, totally irrespective of what we are doing. And I think this is the right line. I think that as intelligent Protestants saw it,
Sorry, bro.
this Catholic way
Dropped
of
it.
linking our salvation to our good works introduces immediately an element of handling, of financial transaction. I see the child drowning,
Wait, did
should
he?
I do it or not? Well, I may gain salvation, so fuck it, why not do it, It makes our good deeds part of almost, I would say, financial investment into the future. But as Luther put it very intelligently, if there is predestination,
It's your
then
moral capital.
the solution is pure goodness. Because you see a child drowning, sorry for this pathetic example, and you know very well that it will not help your salvation in any way if you save the child or not. So it's only goodness that makes you that makes you do it.
I'm an awful cop, dude.
Sorry,
Oh my God.
here, yes. So, let's go on here. What, in this position where the solution is not some kind of a reunification of God with man, we overcome our alienation of God through a simple realization that God is already alienated from himself, self-abandoned. I like to apply here to divinity Hegel's wonderful reading of ancient Greek statues which are impenetrable for us, like what does the Sphinx mean? And you know what's Hegel's formula? The secrets of ancient Greeks, secrets for us, were already secrets for ancient Greeks themselves. And Hegel's theology is precisely this one, that the secrets of divinity are secrets also for divinity itself. This is the old mystical topic. Hegel goes there into that line. You find it in Meister Eckhart and all other guys, that to bring history into God himself, what happens on our earth, our theological activity, decides the fate of God himself in a way. It's the other way around. It's not that God decides. No, we in our struggles, we fight for the fate of God himself. So how to bring this, and now it comes maybe to
completely dependent upon us.
Theological point. I think I improvised a little bit already in my classes about this. Does this mean that Protestantism simply abolishes our freedom? Everyone who knows Luther, and I don't have the time to go into it, but I have it written, a detailed analysis of the tension between Martin Luther and, of course, Thomas Münzer.
Not entirely wrong, but a little hyperbolic, maybe.
Peasant revolt. Maybe this will surprise you, but I'm almost more on the early Luther's side. He was right, Münzer, in criticizing Luther for his compromising, taking the side of the masters and so on. But Münzer, I think, comes all too close then to this perverse instrumental position which comes close to totalitarianism. Because Luther was right, and this was his greatest theological insight, to insist on divine impenetrability, which read in materialist way doesn't mean God knows what he is doing, we just cannot penetrate it. It means that quote from Zapwe, God is crazy, doesn't know it. So Luther warned against precisely what we call today fundamentalism. Any position of an agent, historical, who, my God, what is happening here? I'm getting superstitious. Yesterday it was one, at least they are not black cats, and we will survive there. But it's the Maoist movement. One divides into two. No? Yesterday was one. Okay, sorry, let's go on. Luther comes too close to this, seeing his political movement as direct instrument of the divine will. And this is what Luther is right to prohibit. He insists on this radical impenetrability. There is predestination, but we never know what is predestination. Like, our lives are decided in advance, but we cannot ever know it. So it's absolutely prohibited to claim I am an instrument of the divine will, like the Stalinist communists in a different way. Historical necessity of progress towards
a version of zealotry, for sure.
No, we cannot do it. And I think this is authentic freedom. This idea of my life is predestined, but I don't know what it is. So this terrible struggle to make the right decision. Because, here common sense doesn't work. Because common sense would tell us, why do you worry? If there is predestination, sit down and masturbate and watch hardcore movies. It doesn't matter. No, the idea is that this also, that it doesn't work, explains, we all know it. I'm even repeating myself. I think years ago I was already selling this story.
Yeah, I killed a civilian.
This also explains this paradox of predestination and freedom, explains the greatest mystery of this old Max Weber's thesis. Why is Protestantism, as a religion which is based on predestination, why Protestantism became the religious background, at least originally, of capitalism, which is precisely the
I don't
most
think that's an
active
accident.
social system, a system where you are solicited to be active like crazy all the time. Again, wouldn't it be logical to claim, if it's predestined, fuck off, I lay down, awaken me when God comes, but leave me alone? No, Weber saw this clearly, and Luther, that precisely because you don't know it, knowing that your fate is decided, but not knowing what your fate is, pushes you to incessant activity. And I think that this decision, this difficult decision to discover if there is predestination, fate, necessity, what is that fate, is much closer to authentic freedom than, I'm using now a metaphor that I already used, I'm sorry for my students in my class, than this simple freedom of, I go to a patisserie, they have strawberry
I
cake,
have
chocolate cake,
flashbang
vanilla
goggles on.
cake,
What the
or which
hell?
one I will choose, you know, this simple freedom
That
of
shouldn't have
choice.
done
No,
anything to me.
true freedom is this one. And even now you will say, I'm crazy. But let me give you an example to repeat it that I already give in my class. Think about love, the choice of object in love. It must be free. It's not love, of course, no? But it never happens to you, admit it, as a free choice. If you say, oh, now I will fall in love into that lady or man, it's fake. It is a free decision, but as Schelling would have put it, a transcendental, atemporal free decision, which you experience precisely as its opposite, as your fate. You experience love as, my God, I cannot escape it, I'm caught into it. And that's true freedom. That's the radical freedom. Now you will say, this is sentimental speculation. No, I'll use another example from my class. Isn't it exactly the same with a tough political decision? Not these simple decisions, vote for Macron, vote for Le Pen, which tough, I don't care. But let's make a pathetic example. There is war, my country is attacked, and I have to decide, will I risk my life, do it or not? This is a free decision by me. But if you take the difficult decision that you will fight, you don't experience it as a choice. You experience it, I would love not to do it, but it's my duty, I cannot not do it. I have to do it. You know, and I think this
Come on,
provides
dude. I need to.
this wonderful dialectic described, as far as I know, by philosophers, only nicely, clearly, only by Hegel, how predestination is
I
much
have to
more
grab them from the
paradoxical
front.
if
Okay.
we read Protestantism in a materialist way than the simple notion there is predestination, everything is decided. No, it means we have a fate, but we retroactively create.
Yeah, we do have a fate.
Like,
Yeah.
I freely decide something, and once I decide it, it retroactively becomes necessary. If I do the right thing, I experienced it, my God, I couldn't do it otherwise. I had to do it. That's freedom. So that's my first point about Protestantism, which means that not only you are free, but you are even more free than you thought.
You're
You
too
are
free.
even responsible for your fate, for your necessities. And again, it's already
Pretty
explained
daunting.
in my classes. Here, psychoanalysis rejoins Protestantism, because in
Stop worrying about your
psychoanalysis,
fate, basically.
the obvious result is something like predestination.
That's not
Like,
true.
I think
No.
I'm a free
You gotta
being,
take it
but
with
no,
equal
everything
stride.
is
It's the balance.
predetermined
Yin yang,
through my
all
past
that bullshit.
traumas, through whatever, you know. So I discovered that I'm not free. And this was the fashionable lesson half a century ago with that fashion of structuralism in France. This is how psychoanalysis was read, structural psychoanalysis. You think you are a free subject? No. You are just a puppet. The big other, the symbolic order, runs the game, and so on. But no, Lacan follows here Freud. Yes, you are overdetermined, but You cannot use this overdetermination or psychic necessity which makes you what you are. You cannot use it as an excuse, like, to be vulgar, I'm sorry. I rape a child and then I say to the judges, sorry guys, what can I do? I was overdetermined by my unconscious complex. No, you are predestined by fate, but you are responsible even for that. You are much more radically responsible. And I can't go into it now. I already did it in my class to develop how the same goes also for, that's why it's a great thing, Kantian ethics. When Kant said, do Kant, then do sollst. You can do it because you must do it. Like, no excuse to not do your duty. If it's your duty, you have to do it. But Kant, this is not so often noticed, goes even a step further. He also implies that even doing your duty cannot be an excuse for doing your duty. Like, Chris, I hate you, let me do, like, I have to do something, it's my duty, which will hurt you. I don't have the right to tell you, sorry guy, but it's my duty. No, I don't have the right to externalize it. I'm not responsible only to do my duty. I have to fully subjectively assume also my duty in the sense of what is my duty. This is why, incidentally, I mentioned this briefly in my class, and now I will stop with plagiarizing myself. Don't worry, I will not repeat
I don't think it's
class.
wrong to
This is
state
why
your duty.
I think that although I
necessarily.
admire her, at some point in her otherwise wonderful Eichmann in Jerusalem, if I remember it correctly, Hannah Arendt was wrong. When she took seriously Eichmann's statement that he was just a good Kantian. He did his duty. For him, duty was embodied in Führer's order. So, sorry, I was doing my duty. No, Eichmann did precisely the wrong thing. He was not a Kantian, because he did something that Kant strictly prohibits. He used duty as an excuse. Sorry, I have killing millions of Jews. What can I do? That's my duty.
As an excuse.
You cannot refer to your duty as some objective determination that you have just to follow. You are radically responsible for your duty. Now I will complicate things. Now the end of self-plagiarizing. You will get some new stuff. This solution, this dialectical interconnection of necessity and freedom, where yes, there is necessity, but this necessity is in a deeper sense contingent.
Check your corners.
Like you do something in a contingent way. Once you do it, it retroactively becomes your fate. This solution works only on one condition. The subject, believer, agent, is absolutely constrained by the horizon of his, her, its finite subjectivity. What Protestantism prohibits is the very thought that as a believer, I can, as it were, took a position outside, above myself, and look upon myself as a small particle in the vast reality. Here, since I already mentioned Mao Zedong, I would like to criticize him a little bit at the philosophical level, and incidentally, because of some of my lines like this, Alain Badiou is even now mad at me, Mao Zedong, I think, was wrong when he deployed his Olympic vision, reducing human experience to a tiny, unimportant cosmic detail. In his famous statement where he say we don't fear atomic war and so on. Okay, with that I in principle agree. But Mao went on and said this, a quote from Mao Zedong. The United States cannot annihilate the Chinese nation with its small stack of atom bombs. Even if the US atom bombs were so powerful that when dropped on China, they would make a hole right through the earth, or even blew the earth up, that would hardly mean anything to the universe as a whole, though it might be a major event for the solar system, and so on. It's kind of a weird excuse. Okay,
it is an excuse,
Americans
for sure.
can destroy us, but what does it mean from the standpoint of the universe or whatever? I think that this argument, Mao's, only works if, in a pseudo-Kantian way, we presuppose like the problem is, where is Mao speaking from? From what subjective position when he states that?
I don't know.
He acts as if he speaks from a totally external,
Impartial
purely divine
observer.
position where you see objectively reality with inhuman eyes, and then you can say, okay, our Earth is blown apart, fuck it, a tiny blimp in some small planet, who cares? But here I don't have time to develop it, but this is beautiful theological topic. Intelligent Protestantism have a wonderful vision where it's again that link between contingency and necessity. On the one hand, yes, we are a tiny piece of shit in a vast universe. Protestantism is not ethnocentric, which is why Protestantism, insofar as it stands for modernity, was precisely the religious background of modern science, which precisely introduced the objective view of reality. You know that before Protestantism, the medieval world was Earth in the center, although we humans were not the center of the universe, it was God, but nonetheless, we were the highest point of the created universe, everything turned around us, and so on and so on. So, what Protestantism unites, I don't have time to develop it now, just to give an idea, is, I think, something wonderful. It's, at the same time, this extremely brutal view from an inhuman
I like
case,
Slavoj. He's like very good at
tiny
like
species on Earth
analyzing
that doesn't
ideology.
matter. But nonetheless,
That's
since we cannot
his bread and butter,
ever
basically.
really assume that view, external view, in our ethical practice, we have to act as if whenever, and Kant puts it this very nicely, although objective science is telling us that, fuck it, we are again one tiny piece of dust in the universe, nonetheless, in a big ethical struggle, it's not just our fate that is decided, it, as it were, Kant put it so nicely, the entire universe was created as a background for that struggle of ours. You know, I love this unity of extreme ethnocentrism.
Yeah.
The world was created so that we can fight this battle.
Yeah.
And this radical,
It's empowering.
radically external view. Because
It's empowering for people
this is,
in
a
the
way,
past, I'm sure.
when you witness a big change, revolution or whatever, even with Holocaust, I think the intelligent argument, even Habermas made it, who tries to be a rationalist. But Habermas, I don't agree with him, made once a nice point, where he says that with Holocaust, and I would add nonetheless some other events, like what happened in Congo, other horrible things and so on, something so horrible happens that you, in a way, diminish its horror when you reduce it to a simple human event. Something went wrong in class struggle, whatever. It's horrible to say Holocaust was just a subchapter in class struggle and effect and so on. Something that Habermas said very intelligently, that theological dimension means here just a way, a specific way, to signal that something so horrible happens that it doesn't fit our universe. We cannot I'll put it this way. We cannot simply normalize it as just another.
I don't know what I'm doing
event.
wrong.
That's
I
why
have the flash
it is
goggles.
title.
This should
You
be
may
like
correct me. Maybe you know it more.
I should be
Of one of
immune
the
to
books
this.
on Holocaust, the black sun, the sun itself turned out. You know, like as some people say nicely, when something like Holocaust happened, it's a shame that the world continued to exist. If there were to be an elementary ethics in the world,
out of shame, yeah, we would have just stopped. We would have given up. But we don't.
Now
We refuse.
Thank you for your patience.
Which is good.
Maybe my first more interesting aspect. It's part of this, that's the paradox of Protestantism, radically anthropocentric, but at the same time, let's look at ourselves with inhuman eyes. Here, I think, But I'm reading
Dark
them
Souls, I
by
feel,
them
is kind
new
of like
assembler
the
theory, new
argument of that.
materialism,
The
object-oriented
basic argument of
ontology.
should we continue
They
on?
can be
Is all
combined,
this
is my
suffering still
position.
worth it? Are
Because
we just doomed
what's
to
the true, let's call it
struggle and to
naively,
continue to have others
shattering
suffer
ethical
and a
greatness,
constant
although I
power
read it in a
struggle
different
until
way that it's usually
all of us
read
die?
off. I will focus here on
pretty
so-called new
bleak shit.
materialism, Jane Bennett. This idea
But if
that
we look at
should
everything,
look
this
at
world
our
as
life in the
post-Holocaust,
middle
that's
of
all,
nature as a
we're not going to be very
interaction of
optimistic
agents.
about our future.
She calls
We're going to
them,
tend to
I think, following
engage in nihilism, I
Latour
think.
actants, and they interact, and we should look at it through an inhuman gaze, to see this as a process of interaction, even living interaction, where we are just one of the elements. In her book, I think, Vibrant Matter, Jane Bennett provides a beautiful description of a trash site. She said, we think trash site just nothing, piece of shit there, things rotting. But she says, what if we look at it with an imagined inhuman eye, as a living process? We have a complex interaction of rotting trash, worms, insects, abandoned machines, chemical poisons, and each element, actant, plays its own, never purely passive role. That's, I think, so-called new materialism or object-oriented ontology at its most radical, to provide this type of inhuman view. And again, I think there is an authentic theoretical and ethico-political insight in such an
Didn't see that
approach.
guy. Oh, man.
Agency thereby becomes a social phenomenon, but the limits of sociality are expanded to include all material bodies participating in the relevant assemblage. Say, an ecological public is a group of bodies, some humans, most of them not, and they are subjected to harm.
Dude, that is really tough. I have to get no injuries whatsoever.
Of course, the ethical implication is that we have to acknowledge the entanglement within a larger assemblage. Like, we are not, nature doesn't serve us, we are just one among the agents on the earth. Here comes my first modest disagreement. I think unknowingly this argument of her description also remains radically anthropocentric. You know in what sense? The more it tries to be objective at the level of content, the more it privileges us, human species, as the only species which has access to this universality. That's my problem with those so-called deep ecologists who claim animals. Even a Scandinavian friend of mine wrote a book where he claims even beautiful canyons, pieces of nature, should be treated as subject agents with human rights. Like, there is a beautiful organic totality in. He gives a beautiful example of wonderful rock formation in Iceland, and he says, not only, as it's popular to say now, animals should have their rights, not just human rights, trees should have their rights, even rivers should have their rights. Yeah, but you know what's the catch? They don't know it. We automatically, when we want to act as deep ecologists, is the most arrogant anthropocentric position that you can imagine. Because you automatically assume that we apparently humiliate ourselves, but we humans are the only agents who have access to this universal dimension. I mean, trees don't know about
Why can't this
when
just
a river
have
is ruining the trees, it doesn't know that it is infringing upon others' rights. It's the same falsity as the one, I think, of a certain type of multiculturalism, where we claim
allows you to unlock doors quietly.
Are not the only ones who have the right. Also, other cultures have the right. But the more we humiliate ourselves, we Western civilization, we are just one among them, the more we act as the only one who has the access to the universal dimension and can say what the rights of the others are. Like, I felt this quite often in debates in the United States. It's typical arrogant, politically correct attitude that, and once I witnessed it, a white liberal guy, of course they're always white, defended black rights. That's perfect. I'm radically for them. But the problems were what that some black guys then didn't agree with him. And basically he started to shout at him, like, you don't know what are your rights, I will tell you, you know. The hidden arrogance which, and I think it's the same problem with those who sympathize with refugees and so on and so on. It's that's why I find suspicious.
Hey, people don't know their rights necessarily, though. I think that's good to draw attention to that.
I call it a reversed white man's burden. You know, white man's burden is an old English expression, colonialist, for we white people are tasked by nature, God, whomever. Our burden is to lead other nations.
Yeah.
Life,
yeah.
Whatever. Now we have the opposite.
Like from The Shining. White man's burden, Floyd. White man's burden.
Racism. Whenever something happened,
and then it just makes you not feel bad for him.
Slaughter like Rwanda, it has to be an effect of colonialism. And I have an African friend from Nigeria who got the point and exploded.
Wow, nice signal.
You are such racists, you Europeans. You don't even allow us to be genuinely evil. You treat us as such innocent children that you know, whenever we do something wrong, it must be your guilt. This is the new version of white man's burden. Let's look around. There is a slaughter in Kampuchea. Oh, it must be an effect of colonialism. There is, okay, let's go on. Now things will get even much nastier. Jane Bennett, if she were to be here, would have exploded. My ultimate example of assemblage would be, not as a cheap provocation, not, please don't misunderstand me, to read assemblage theory as proto-fascist, quite the opposite. That I even tempted, but I'm afraid I would be even more attacked than I am, to write a short text on describing Auschwitz as an assemblage. Let's forget about human suffering. Let's look Auschwitz as a collaboration between humans, victims, worms, fire there, and so on. A kind of objective process of objective process of material interaction. And we can say not only the Nazis were agents, inmates were the agents, worms who ate the corpses, if there were some, if they were not properly burned, were agents, and so on and so on. And we can do it. But now another philosophical point, I'm so sad I don't have time to develop it. What we get here, and now I will turn to Gilles Deleuze, towards whom I'm critical, but he's a genius, has ingenious insight. Deleuze said that his thinking tries to construct, a quote from Deleuze, a perception of reality as it was before or after man, humanity. A perception released from its human coordinates. He says we should view reality as, quote, iridescent chaos of a world before man. Now, I claim this doesn't mean cosmological speculation, how did Big Bang look? It means that take a phenomenon like Auschwitz and you look at it from outside of human concerns. Of course, it's an, let's not misunderstand me, it's an utterly obscene vision, because in some sense you cannot do it. And here I come to my next point.
It's a
very brief,
completely empirical look at the Holocaust. I just don't think you can do that.
I think that
you should
here
focus on that.
Introduces, and he does it at some point.
Non-academic, non-empirical necessarily. Well, empirical, but also
for us, phenomenal reality, and in itself
morally weighted though too.
Nominal, independent of us.
Because we don't want that
naive sense
to be done anymore. Obviously,
in itself is reality out there the way it really is outside our view, but in itself, as I will put it like this, an impossible phenomenon. The problem with the vision of Auschwitz that I gave to you is not that you cannot claim it's bluffing, that it's the way Auschwitz really was. No, it's still our view, but it's impossible view. It's too dramatic. As ethical human beings, we cannot afford to look at reality in that way, where inmates are, the burned people there are just reduced to one among the actants together with worms and whatever. So my point is this one, that here Claude Lanzmann, with whom I often don't agree, I think, to shock you, that his Shoah, I find it very suspicious ethically. But at some point he was right. He wrote somewhere that if he were to discover, let's say that some Nazi sadist did it, if he were to discover reels, movie, cinema, with direct shooting of the most brutal moments of Auschwitz. You see the bodies being gassed, and then how in panic mother climbs upon her child to be a little bit higher, to be gassed. All the most brutal moments. He said, I would burn it immediately. And he is right. You see too much there. But you see the point. It's not that you see objective reality the way it see. You see a phenomenon. It's still a phenomenon. But a phenomenon which cannot be integrated into our reality.
We can't
philosophy.
emphasize with it entirely.
Point, which may be problematic to some of you. At some point, I got even for showing this part in London. An old lady approached me and said, basically, she demanded from me a trigger warning. She said it was too brutal, you shouldn't have shown it to us. But I don't believe in this logic of trigger warning. I think that academia is not a safe place when you escape harsh life. Academia, on the contrary, should confront that. Okay, so let's go on. In this messy world where everything is on us as ethical subjects, but at the same time, you see the paradox I'm saying. Look, for example, at slavery in the United States. You can provide an objective history. It was a collaboration of black stripes in Africa who were selling the slaves, blah, blah. You do an objective history. You can do it, but it's an utter obscenity. To do it from this neutral way, objectivity becomes an utter obscenity. It's an obscenity to report on it in an objective way. So again, if we try to bring together the two aspects, this ruthless objectivity and at the same time utter ethical engagement, what kind of ethics do we get? Here comes now my final example. One of the good aspects of globalization, I think, I really love it, is I'm not against globalization, you know what? Because it's genuinely multicultural. By this I mean a simple thing, not multicultural in this usual left liberal sense, but in the sense that it's not only American culture and maybe French, English, also smaller nations get their chance. Do you remember how years ago there was a period of South Korean, Taiwanese movies? There was a period even of Romanian movies. They're very good, wonderful sense of irony and so on. Never forget that this is also a good effect of globalization. It's not simply we will all eat hamburgers and watch Hollywood blockbusters. If anything, my prediction is that one possible result of globalization will be that Hollywood will start losing. I mean, who still wants to watch their stupid blockbusters where they even cannot produce new formulas and all they can do is endless remakes of old movies and then combining them. Now you have Batman with Superman and so on. It's despair. So what I'm trying to say is that I like to read the good detective novels, and we have now a new wave, and that's what I like, I discovered. it's no longer those a couple of privileged sites, like for classical whodunit England, for hard-boiled novels, LA area or United States, maybe a little bit of France and so on. Now they can happen, detective novels, literally everywhere at any time. Do you know that you already have novels which take place in ancient Egypt? A priest who is a detective at some stupid pharaoh's court. You have detective novels, Stephen Saylor writes them, which happen in ancient Rome. An acquaintance of Julius Caesar does the work. You have one series on Alexander the Great, and so on, anywhere. Medieval, Umberto Eco started the fashion, medieval. You have them now which take place in Tibet, in Russia, and my favorite are those which take place in extreme circumstances. Like, you have now a whole subspecies of detective novels which take place in two of what, at least in Europe, we perceive as extreme moments, the last years of war in Germany and the harshest Stalinism. Like now, yesterday, I finished a novel called Jim McDermott, Peenemünde, where von Braun built rockets, deceptions, where there is a murder in 44, one of the engineers is shot in Peenemünde. And I love, or you have Stalin, when 35, a body is discovered in the middle of Moscow. An honest policeman tries to resolve the crisis, but the victim is a foreigner, KGB intervenes, whole mess.
Yeah, this is a fucking mess.
Not to get lost.
Restart.
These lines, okay, I will tell you a dream, because nobody will want to do it. I don't care if you know it. My simple dream is to do a novel, but honest one, not cynical, which takes place in Auschwitz. Like inmates, and one is found strangled. And they are all on the edge of dying, but one of them tries to resolve it as a murder case. And then I want to do a paradoxically upbeat, tragic ending. He solves the crime, but then they all go in a to a well-known place with a big burning machine and so on. So along these lines,
a little tasteless.
I
Okay.
love the new. This is old story. Yesterday's news. Sweden, even Iceland, Norway, Joe Nesbo. My favorite are now thrillers come from Denmark. Not only novels, but also TV series, The Killing, and a series of novels which were made into films, a trilogy. I want to show you a short clip from one of them. The original title is Flaskenpost, Message in a Bottle, and in English, I don't know why, but it's a very good change of title. It was changed into A Conspiracy of Fate. Incidentally, I would love to write a text on the logic of, that now they no longer do it, but in the 50s and 60s, even later in some countries, they were always, when they dubbed a movie for another country, they were changing the titles all the time. For example, it's interesting, Hitchcock's North by Northwest. In Germany, it was quite logically, Der Unsichtbare Dritte, the invisible third, and so on. My favorite example, sorry, I cannot abstain from playing bad taste racist jokes. You know that for Brazilians, I spoke with you, Portuguese are
racist jokes.
stupid. The idea is all the intelligent guy from Portugal went to Brazil. Idiots remained there. So you know the story. I will not use time of Hitchcock's. The joke in Brazil is
I was trying to speak on that. That was dumb.
Title was changed in Portugal into The Son Who Was His Own Mother, to make it understandable. So along these lines, this time it works. The title is A Conspiracy of Fate. A Danish Mar from 2016, again, a call to illegal activity. You can immediately download it from Pirate Bay or whatever. I will not bore you with the story, but just I will show you, just a minute please, 4 or 5 minutes clip. It's the story of an honest policeman who is described as a terminally depressive guy, always in despair, of course totally atheist, and children are disappearing, they are killed in a strange sadistic way, and At the end, he, the detective, locates the murderer, who is really a kind of ideal Parsifal, Aryan guy with blue long hair, a pathological murderer who thinks he is an instrument of devil's son. And his task is, he says, to destroy the faith of the parents. It's not just to torture children, but he does this so that in presence of parents, or so that parents are aware of it. So he says his main task is not just to torture and kill people, but to do it in such a way that it destroys their faith.